Mark Cox, do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You see my screen?
I'm using a double screen. So, oh yeah, I see it. I see it.
Did-
Sometimes I get stuck behind.
Does it say class 10, 217?
Yes, sir. Class pack page 36, right underneath.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to step out for a moment and fill my water glass. Charlie Wagner, you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Allison Taylor, you see my screen?
I can see it.
Which one is it, Excel or the Word announcements?
The word announcements.
Okay, great. One more minute. 3 o'clock, time to start. I updated the Brightspace announcements because I think I got too much material to cover thoroughly. I think we're going to have to omit aggregate worksheet function. I think. I wrote for homework 5, the aggregate problem. I'll give you full credit if you make any reasonable attempt. Let's get started with Shanghai, Jakarta. I'll look at the class pack first. So we're talking about dynamic array worksheet functions, sort by, filter, and unique. We're going to look at the aggregate, but only an overview. We'll look at supply chains right now and do a homework overview. The first, supply chain, transportation. We're given a bunch of factories where a product is available, a bunch of warehouses where the product is needed, and we know how much it costs to ship one container between each factory and warehouse. How much should you ship from each? More generally, instead of factories and warehouses, we have supply points and demand points or destinations. Text verbal, choose shipments from each factory to each warehouse to minimize the total shipping cost while recognizing 2 types of constraints. The total shipments into each warehouse must equal the demand that is forecast there, and the total shipments out of each factory cannot exceed factory capacity. I mentioned in passing that there are similar problems of assigning machines to jobs, or truck drivers to vehicles, or airline crew, that is the flight attendants and the cockpit crew, to individual flights. But I turned this red, we don't have time to discuss that. I just state that the concept is applicable to more than just transportation. And all along I had, this page is not testable. I don't even think I'll elaborate on it. Okay, let's go back to Shanghai, Jakarta. Let me zoom up a little bit. Blue-gray are given data. Red border, changing cells, decision cells. The double black border is the target cell. We've got some conditional formatting, which I will look at in 10 minutes, not yet. From these factories to these warehouses, the blue-gray is the cost of shipping one container, manufacturing plus transporting or shipping. From Tijuana to Atlanta, $78.40. Let's clear the changing cells. I have row sums and column sums. Look at the cells that I just turned orange. Formulas trace precedence. The Shanghai constraints will involve the sum of C to J 14. That means the summation or the total Shanghai ships to Atlanta plus Shanghai to Pittsburgh plus Shanghai to Kansas City plus Shanghai to anywhere can't exceed the capacity of 12,000. That copies down. I'll trace precedence for every second source. Kuala Lumpur to anywhere can't exceed 15,000. Now, solver is really stupid. If we tell it to solve the problem that I've described so far, solver will say, good news, I found a real cheap solution. It doesn't cost anything if you don't ship anything to anywhere. That's not a helpful observation. Instead, we need column sums. For the Atlanta warehouse or destination, Shanghai to Atlanta plus, Jakarta to Atlanta plus, Kuala Lumpur to Atlanta plus anywhere to Atlanta must equal 3,000. And that copies to the right. Let's see the solution. Data solver. We want to minimize by changing cells C14 to J18, the red border cells. Subject to CJ19 equals CJ21. They do not currently equal. CJ19 equals CJ21. And K14 through K18 can't exceed M14 to M18. Let me close that because I did not yet discuss the target cell. C23, let me trace the precedence, remove and retrace. C23 is the sum product of C5J9, the blue-gray rectangle, comma, C14J18, the red border cells, the changing cells that have red borders. 6440 multiplied by whatever number of units we choose to ship from Shanghai to Atlanta, plus 80.4 multiplied by whatever number of units we ship from Shanghai to Pittsburgh, and so forth. Here is the solution. Solver found a solution. All are satisfied. The target cell is 3,540,900. I call your attention to the fact that I made a copy of that in November 32. Take a moment and double check this model. I'll give you 3 minutes. Hello, please mute yourself.
La tercera vez pretendo ponerlo bien. La mesa, ¿no?
Please mute yourself. Okay. There's a moral there for me. I think sometimes I don't realize I'm being recorded and I'm yelling at my computer or whatever. It happens to all of us. Let's go on and discuss it. My thoughts, use the solution. I don't know who's talking. Does anybody know who's talking? Manuel Pascal, do you hear me? Use the solution for aggregate decisions ahead of time on where to source. Notify your vendors. For example, we're not going to use Pittsburgh at all. Kuala Lumpur, we're going to use very little. we're going to use 2,000 units of the 15,000 monthly capacities. Tijuana, we're going to use 2/3, 14 out of 31. We could contract unneeded capacity at Kuala Lumpur, Tijuana, Pittsburgh. Now let me pose a what if question. I'll pretend to be surprised that we're not using Pittsburgh at all. I would like to use Pittsburgh, the domestic factory. All the other factories are international. It is important to have domestic manufacturing presence so your design engineers can just walk across the street and go to the factory and see how easily it is to design without making a 24-hour trip to Shanghai or Jakarta, etc. Of course, Tijuana is not that far away. We want to produce at least 1,000 units at Pittsburgh. At least I think I do. If it costs me an extra $1 million, I'm not interested. If it costs me an extra 1%, yes, I think I am interested. In other words, I'd like to know how much it would cost if I insisted that we produced at least 1,000 in Pittsburgh for new product and new process design. How much would this cost? How would I start to address that problem? I already have a linear program with constraints. We can't exceed the capacities. We must meet the demands. Look at the cell that I'll turn violet. Where's violet? That is the total shipped out of Pittsburgh. How about if I say that must be at least 1,000 and reference G32? Let's go to solver, data solver. I'm going to add a constraint. Add, the violet cell is greater than or equal to 1,000. Once again, I added a constraint. K18, the violet cell, is greater than or equal to G32. Solve, read the message, solver found a solution. And the new solution is 3,545,300. Let me give you a moment to confirm that. 3,545,300. Here's the analysis I would do. Look at the yellow cell, November 33. I have a reference to the new target cell value, and I've done the analysis for you. In N32, I have the original linear program value. In N33, I have the new value. Subtract them, that's an extra 4,400. And as a percent, N34 over N32, the extra cost divided by the original cost. It's an extra 0.124%. That is not 12%. That's 0.1%. It's a negligible cost for a major strategic advantage. So for the first time, I realized, yes, I would like to insist on 1,000 units of production in my domestic Pittsburgh factory. Here's something that's not testable, but I want to discuss it. A model. Choose shipments from each factory to warehouse. We just saw that in the class pack. Shipments into each warehouse must equal the demands. Shipments out of the factories can't exceed factory capacities. A long time ago, like on class 1 or class 2, I said a model contains only the essential aspects of the problem, ignoring less important details. when are the ships going to sail from Shanghai, from Jakarta, and so forth, from the nearest port? Who's going to drive the trucks from the US port to our warehouses? When will the trucks be driven? I'm ignoring all of that in this model because those are not yet important. When I plan aggregate production, I don't need to know those details. I just need to know that we can ship from Shanghai to Atlanta at this cost. Okay, I've discussed it all except for the conditional formatting. Let me give you 2 minutes to review the model. Let's look at the conditional formatting for the blue-gray range, C5 through J9. Home tab, styles group, conditional formatting, manage rules, edit rule. I don't want to edit it, but I have to edit it to see it. With C5 active, the formula is equals C5 relative is the min of relative C always 5 colon relative C always 8. And the format is a little bit darker gray. Let's cancel that. So the cheapest in each column is darker gray than the other entries in the column. For Atlanta, we could use Pittsburgh, $96 and change to get goods from Pittsburgh to Atlanta. Tijuana, only $78.40. Kuala Lumpur, $96.60. Jakarta, $75, and the cheapest overall is Shanghai. Obviously, it's manufacturing that's cheaper, not the shipping is actually higher, but the manufacturing plus transportation, cheapest for Shanghai, cheapest in each column. Type a 1 in C8. C8 gains the new darker formatting, and C5 loses the new darker formatting. Reed Ezel, are you there?
I am.
Can you see the darker shading? That 6440 on my shared screen is darker than the 7530?
I can.
Okay, great. Conditional formatting for the cheapest in each column. The next conditional formatting I want to look at is the equal signs. Sometimes we don't literally use solve a solution. This is not testable. Maybe I don't like the fact that Pittsburgh is served by 3 separate sources, Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur and Pittsburgh. Let me try deleting it, put another solution in the changing cells and see how much they cost. Let me try a different solution. If it is very much more expensive than Solver's solution, then I don't want it. But if my alternative solution is only slightly cheaper than Solver, excuse me, If my alternative solution is only slightly more expensive, oh, I misspoke. Yes, I did. We've got the cheapest solution. I try a new solution. If my new solution is vastly more expensive than Solver's cheapest solution, then I don't want my new solution. But if my new solution is only a little bit more expensive than Solver's cheapest solution, then maybe I do want my solution. The only point I'm making is that I might fiddle with the changing cell values. The conditional formatting for the equal sign says I have a problem. The number above is supposed to be equal to the number of below. It is not, because I made a tentative change right in here. Let's look at the formatting, conditional formatting with B, let's see, C20 active. I will select C20, J20. Home styles, conditional formatting, manage rules. I don't need to edit. I can read the short formula. With C19 active, nope, with C20 active, the formula is equals, that's the short form of the if C19 is not equal to C21. If the number above the active cell is not equal to the number below the active cell, then turn it red. So this equal sign does not get shading because the number above equals the number below. This equal sign does get flagged red shading because the number above is not equal to the number below. 2 minutes. I'm going to solve it again. The takeaway is the nature of the transportation model, rectangular range of changing cells with row sums and column sums forming the constraints. We used linear programming to see how good an alternative solution is. I think I want to produce at least 1,000 units at Pittsburgh. How much would it cost? So I added a constraint. The Pittsburgh, that's violet, at least 1,000. I saw the extra cost was 0.124%, much less than about 0.1%, a little more than 0.1% extra. That's a good use of linear programming. Let's go on now to the next topic, data validation. So we finished Shanghai, Jakarta. I'm probably not going to cover, I don't know. Let's see if I have time for it. Data validation. Aggregate data validation. We have a homework problem coming up, homework set 5, that requires data validation. I asked you to read this sheet before class, so I'll go quickly. Activate either of the two orange cells and read the input prompt. Enter only integers between 0 and 100. I can enter 1. I can enter 34. I cannot enter 200. It will reject it. I cannot enter -2. I cannot enter 2.5. I can enter 46. Enter only integers between 0 and 100. The next example is activate the other orange cell, read it, select a sales rep from the list. So I can enter Sue or Tom or Bob. I can type in there Allie, but I can't type my own name because it's not in the list. I hid the list of allowable values. That's typical. These values should be hidden, put in a hidden sheet. All right, data validation. There are 3 types of actions for invalid entries. You can stop and force the user to re-enter, or you can simply warn the user that bad data was entered and allow the user to continue. The last 2 are similar, warning and information. The last 2 allow the user to proceed. Validation, read before class. Data tab, be sure you can find data validation. Data tab, data validation on your screen right here, depending on the size of your monitor. You will see all of this when we work the in-class problems. Validate formula with alert options. Let's look at the first example. I have a bunch of weights for the 5 scenarios. I want those weights to sum to 1 exactly. 0.2, 0.5, that's 0.7, plus this is 0.97. They do sum to 1. Now I want to change the weights. I want to make one of them bigger and one of them smaller. In the process of changing one of the weights to a bigger value, like 0.5, the summation of the weights will temporarily not equal 1. But I'm going to allow myself to proceed, to continue, yes. Because I have to allow myself to proceed. I just made one of the weights bigger. Now I'll make another weight smaller, and they sum to 1. I absolutely had to use warning or information, because if I use stop, I can't do it. It takes 2 separate steps to change the weights. Make one of them bigger and the other one smaller, but that's a separate step. Make the second one smaller. As soon as I make the first one bigger, the weights do not sum to 1. It's not okay, but it's accepted with a warning. You're allowed to proceed. Let's see which cells are conditionally formatted. Control G, special, not, well, we saw conditional formatting. I meant to say data validated. We've seen conditional formatting before, and you can go to special, see all the cells that are conditionally formatted. I want to go to special and see all the data validated. There they are. We will repeat that validation in a moment. I've got 2 examples. Let's actually do the in-class problems and then discuss homework 5. Let's go to the sheet in-class problems. Validate C5 so that only whole numbers between 0 and 999, 999 may be entered. Select a cell, data, data validation. We could look at the error alert and choose warning or info, but let's use the default stop, the default. Let's go to settings. Allow whole number. We need to give it a minimum and a max. Okay. I can put 2 and that's perfectly valid. I can put 67, that's okay. Is -1 okay? No, it's not. Validate C7 so that only whole numbers can be entered. Data validation. Whole number between 0 and 999. Validate C11 so that at most 5 characters may be entered. Hint, use text length. Even though we may be entering numbers and punctuation marks, we're going to use text length. Activate C11, data validation. Allow. Text length. Between, I'm going to give it 0 and 5 in my example, 0 and 5. So I can enter OGSM. I cannot enter Vanderbilt. Too long. I can use data validation text to verify that all telephone numbers have 10 digits. 3-digit area code, 3-digit exchange, and 4-digit extension. I can insist that 9 digits be entered for Social Security number without the hyphen. Validate C17 so that only dates within the last year may be entered. Hint, use date and fill in the start and end dates. Data validation. Date. Let me let you think about that for a moment. I don't know that if we've seen the today worksheet function. The earliest possible date is equal today, open close, minus 365. Let me not worry about whether it's a leap year. Let's just say within the last 365 days. The latest possible date is today, open close. Alt print screen. Okay. Darn, I must have missed it. Data validation. Function alt print screen. God, let's do it again. These are the settings I gave it. The earliest date I could enter is today minus 365. Then 365 days in a year. The latest date I could enter is equals today. So I can enter January 1st of the current year. That's fine. That's within the last year. Let me enter 1/1/20. I'll enter the full year. January 1st, 2020. That's 13 and a half months ago, something like that. And it's rejected. Those are the settings I used. Four, C26 to C48, that's this yellow range, this yellow column, is validated to have values between 1 and 5. But before the validation was applied, the data had already been entered. Have Excel circle the invalid data. You don't have to select anything. Data, data validation, drop down arrow, circle invalid data. Data validation. I don't want to clear all. I want the drop down arrow. Clear validation circles. So let me do it again. Data validation, drop down arrow, circle invalid data. Those four are invalid. I'm telling you that they were already validated to be between 1 and 5. Suppose I have no idea what the problem is for that purple cell, but I do know this is a mistake. It should have been a 2, not a 7. I do know this is a mistake. It should have been a 1. And I don't know what to do with this. So those 4 Marines, well, they're maroon now, violet. I corrected 2 of the values. I left the other 2 because I'm pretending I don't know what to do about that. Have Excel circle the invalid data, then enter any valid data in each invalid cell. Let me give you 3 minutes. Okay, validate L5 so that only these entries can be used. Select the cell, data validation, list the source is O6 to O11. And the drop-down arrow allows me to select 71, or I can type 76. That's valid. I cannot type 75. It rejects it. Of course, if I know where the range of allowable values are, I could go ahead and change this range to allow 75. That would defeat the purpose. You should not make this available to the user. The list of allowable values should not be available to the user. Can I enter 71.0000? Yes, I can. Can I enter 71.01? No, I can't. It has to be exactly one of these values. Validate O15 to O19 so that the sum must be 100. Let's clear. Let's see if there is any validation. I don't think there is. It's not validated. The sum is not 100. Okay. I thought there might be some validation there and I was going to clear it, but I'm not. Select the range. Data validation. Custom. And the formula is equals the sum of these numbers equals 100. I have not pressed enter yet. I really need to use absolute referencing because I want the formula for O15. The active cell is O15. I want the formula for O15 to be this. For O16, I want the same formula. So let me come and select the cell reference and absolute it. With O15 active equals the sum open, $O, $15, colon, $O, $19 equals 100. Function alt print screen. Okay. Oh, I'm not finished. Let me change the weights. This one I'll put 22. And it doesn't match. So, okay. What do I need to do? Can someone tell me what I need to do so that this is usable? I do want to change the weights. I recognize that the new weights must be 100. Must sum to be 100. I need to change the stop setting. Select the cells, data validation. Error alert. It should not be the default stop. It should be warning. Now, if I change one of them to 22, I get a permission to continue, but that is not the default. If I absentmindedly ignore the question and press enter, then I'm choosing no, don't continue. I will press yes. The sum is 102. I'll make another weight 8. The sum is 100. How about data validation with any value allowed? That seems contradictory, but it is useful. Validate K30 to K41 to allow any value with the input message. Enter your name after you approve. Let's select the yellow cells. Data tab, yes. Data validation. Input message. In a context where you trust everybody, now that's a strong if. For example, the Owen School interviews candidates for new faculty positions on a regular basis. Maybe I interviewed somebody and I took him to dinner with Mike LaPrey and Moomin Kurtelis, and there's a big expense right there. And the dean, Eric Johnson, or the operations area head, Mike LaPrey, wants to know if these are approved. All right, when I select a cell, I get the input message. That's the important thing. If I select any cell in the range, I get the same input message. Maybe I do not recognize the first one, but I recognize the second one. I'll just put my initials, LJL. Eric and Mike LaPrey know who LJL is. I don't even have to be consistent. I'm enter my name. Then I'll email this to a colleague like Yazan Allen, and he'll put his initials or his name where he recognizes it. And then he'll send it to Hallie Cho. She'll send it to KJ Yahoo. And then when it comes back to the dean or Mike LaPrey, if everybody is confirmed, then it's okay. Validate with any value allowed means you just want to see the input message. Now that was kind of quick, and I wanted you to pay attention. So I'm going to announce, since we're going a little fast, there will be no exam questions on data validation. However, there is a homework question. It's team. So you do need to know a little bit about it. You need to be able to figure it out on the fly. There is a data validation homework problem. Team, you need to figure it out. But because we went fast, there's no test questions on data validation. Let me give you a couple of minutes. I will copy this announcement to Monday's announcement. But if you want to write it down now, you may. There will be no test questions on data val. There is a homework. Now let me go to homework set 5 and take an overview of it. I want to look at the data validation question. Let me give you a minute to catch up, to open up this workbook and to perhaps review a little bit more data validation. All right, let's go on. Oops. Joe and Sue are sales representatives. Each is responsible for different products. Joe is responsible for widgets, gadgets, and devices. Sue is responsible for smartphones, licenses, and insurance. The first step is to 1, in B2, use data validation, allowing only E2 to E3 as inputs, allowing a choice of Joe or Sue. I want you to data validate B2 so that only Joe or Sue may be entered. Secondly, if the user enters Joe, then the allowable entries in B6 are widgets, gadgets, and devices. On the other hand, if the user enters Sue in B6, then the allowable entries in, if the user enters Sue in B2, the allowable entries in B6 are smartphones, licenses, or insurance. If the user enters Joe in B2, then the B6 allowable entries are widgets, gadgets, and devices. Hint, create these named ranges. That should be Joe. I just turned it violet. That should be named range Joe. So that if the user enters Joe in B2, then the allowable entries are those in the named range Joe. If the user enters Sue, the only alternative entry, the allowable entries are those in the named range Sue. Joe should be D7 to D9 in alphabetical order. Sue should be E7 to E9. If the user enters Sue licenses, then the allowable entries are these. Let me mark them as a color in those green ones. Oh, I made a typo. I made a mouso graphical error. If the user enters Sue licenses, then the allowable entries are these green ones. Sue licenses should be named I-13 through I-15. In B12, use data val to allow a choice of any entry in E13 to 16 if Joe Widgets is chosen in B2 and B6. F13 to F16 if Joe Gadget's chosen in B2 and B6. G13 to G17. Joe devices is a longer list if Joe devices are chosen, and so forth. Finally, use conditional formatting to shade B6 and B12 yellow if the content is not valid. Invalid entries can occur temporarily when B2 is changed. Let me elaborate. I want to show you part of the solution, but not all of the solution. Downbounce on me, baby. My first step is to allow Joe or Sue. I'll choose Joe. My second step is to allow widgets or gadgets or devices. Joe, widgets, gadgets, or devices. That's not supposed to be there. I'm showing you the answer. Joe, widgets, gadgets, or devices, because I chose Joe. If I choose Joe and gadgets, Joe gadgets, the allowable choices are speakers, headphones, keyboard, or USB light. Okay, I chose Joe gadgets. Now pay attention, please. Suppose I change my mind and I change B2 to Sue. Temporarily, B6 is invalid and B12 is invalid because I chose gadgets when B2 was Joe, but I changed B2. So they are temporarily invalid. As soon as I correct them, the yellow flag will disappear. That's what I mean when I say use conditional formatting to shade B6 and B12 yellow if the content is not valid. Invalid entries can temporarily occur in B6 when B2 is changed, in B12 when B6 is changed. I recommend that you use the COUNTIF worksheet function. Let's look at that for a moment. I also recommend that you come to the review sessions, but that's another matter. Let's go to mark fields in a list. I'll give you a moment to catch up. I solved the problem using the COUNTIF worksheet function. Let's review it. How many cells contain a 2? Simple case with hard coding. Now I am in the book, mark fields in a list. Sheet, COUNTIF needed for homework 5. How many cells contain a 2? In F13 equals count if the range C12 to E14, that's the heavy border, equal 2. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them contain a 2. What about me? Why didn't I count this yellow 2? Somebody answer me.
Professor, are we on we might not be seeing the right sheet, or maybe I'm just not seeing the right sheet.
No, I'm not seeing it either.
What are you seeing?
Just the
We're
homework sheet.
still, yeah, the homework sheet.
Oh my, I don't know what's going on. You don't see an Excel sheet with A1 has count if?
No,
Okie dokie. Tell me again what you see. What is the homework sheet?
the solution, homework 5, look up validate. And you're on the validation solution page.
Okie dokie. I have to come here. Here. It's here, isn't it, that I find share screen? Your screen sharing is paused. Stop share. God damn. While I'm struggling, please look at sheet count if need for homework 5 and start reading it, please. Share screen. Share. Okay, what do you see now? What do you see now?
The count F worksheet. Could you say which day that sheet is under?
Which day? I didn't understand the question.
Like
It's in
in
the
your,
class 10 folder.
It's in the homework shelves.
okay,
Allison.
thank you. Thank you.
Oh wait, maybe not that
No,
one.
I don't think it is. Oh, I understand the question now. I think it's in homework class 10. Yes, it is. Class 10, data validation. Mark fields in a range. Perhaps I didn't emphasize that properly. Okay, Maggie Colburn, are you with me? Do you have the book open? Mark fields in a range. Avery Mitchell, you have it open? You have it open?
Yes.
Okey doke. In case anybody needs another minute or two, I'll give them. Count if. F13 has count if the range C12 to E14 equal to 2. 1, 2, 3, there's four twos. Why isn't this one counted? This other 2 in C14?
It's rounded to 2. It's not 2.
It's not 2, correct. C14 displays 2, but that's not relevant. C14 contains 1.999. Better, of course, is to put the threshold in a separate cell and to reference that cell. Another example, count the vendors used. We use these vendors: United Parcel Service, Federal Express, DHL, UPS, United States Postal Service. How many times did we use DHL? The COUNTIF in the range of labels D 25 to 33, F 30. I think you'll find that helpful to do homework 5. Let's work a problem involving the COUNTIF. I'm going to skim the OR worksheet function. I want you to be able to read it. But it's not yet something that I'll cover well enough for you to write it. Equals if or, and I put 2 conditions, or this is true, comma, that is true. It means if either one is true. It's a, I struggle with how I should cover this. I want to show you what someone actually did in the following context. I'm in sheet mark special cells. These counties in the state of Florida can legally not charge sales tax to a company, just like Vanderbilt, when I need to go buy some marker pens. Can you see me? I don't see myself right now. Vanderbilt is a nonprofit institution. We don't have to pay sales tax. There was a legal exemption from sales tax for customers in these counties. So given some sales, a dollar amount in the county, the user did the following: equals if or. The county in question, D14, that's Osceola. If D14 equals K15, comma, D14 equals K16, comma, D14 equals K17, D14 equals K18, D14, that's ridiculous. The value, if true, is triple exclamation points in quotes. The value, if false, if it's not a special county, is quote, quote. A more common application, mark special cells, is the following. It's very common for companies to hire a sales rep and they get a small percentage commission if they sell to an existing customer, defined as someone who has purchased from the company in the last 2 years. They get a 10% commission. But if the sales rep sells to a brand new customer, meaning someone who has not purchased from the company in the last 2 years, they get a larger percentage commission. So you need to know if the customer is in the list of house accounts. In this example, is Osceola in this list? The answer is yes. Is Levy County in this list? The answer is no. In another more common managerial application, is Sue in this? No. Is the company Acme Incorporated in the list? Yes or no? Okay, let's work. So I've mentioned a possible extension, but let's solve the problem that was worked. Equals if or. I don't want to use that approach. It works, but what if I had a list of 200 special cells in the list? Then I would literally have to type something 200 times. I don't want to do that. I mentioned in passing compact if equals if or D14 equals open curly braces. Marion in quotes, Pinellas in quotes, Orange, Osceola, etc. That's not testable, but I wanted to mention the alternative view. Where else have you seen from me open curly brace, close curly brace?
In the
In-
sort function.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say in the sort function.
Yes, in the sort dynamic array worksheet function. I gave you an example of sorting by multiple columns and used that notation. But this is not testable right here. In class, oops. Extend G14 to display triple exclamation point where appropriate. These answers are correct, but impractical. Osceola is in the special counties. So the display in G14 should be triple exclamation point. Levy County is not in the special county list. So the display should be blank. Let me give you a couple of minutes to think about it. In G14, I show the number of occurrences of D14 in the list of special counties. I don't want the display to be any numbers 1 and 0. I want the display to be triple exclamation point. If Osceola is in the list, it is. I want the display to be empty if it's not in the list. Any thoughts on how I should proceed? What worksheet function have I taught you that gives one of two possible values depending on whether something is true or false? I got a lot of sleepyheads. The if worksheet function equals if. I want the logical test to be equals 1, comma. What's the value if true? If the count of the number of times Osceola appears in the list is equal to 1, I want it to display what?
Quote, 3 exclamation points, quote.
Yes, indeed. And if it's not in the list, I want it to display quote, quote. Let me copy down what I've just done, and I get the same answers as I do in column E or F. That means the answer is correct. E and F are correct. They're just too tedious. Equals if the count of the number of occurrences is equal to 1, then this, otherwise that. So what did I just say? I illustrated the count if. We've already seen the sum if. So the count if is not a terribly the sum if is not terribly difficult, given that you know the, wait a minute. The count if is not terribly difficult, given that you know the sum if. Maybe I'm the sleepyhead I was referring to. The sum if we already saw, so the count if is pretty easy. Given a list of special cells, special counties, special products, special customers, whatever, I want to mark Osceola with exclamation because it's in the list. The name of the book, Mark Fields in a Range. So equals if the count of the Osceola is 1 in the list, then give it that. You will need to use the count if, I think, in homework set 5. Let me show you a possible problem that could occur. Suppose I don't realize that Osceola is already in there. and I accidentally include it twice, then I get the wrong answer. Osceola is there. In fact, it's there twice. There's something wrong with G14. What do you recommend I do to fix it? What should I do to display the triple exclamation point? It's not 1. The count of D14 in the list is not 1, it's 2. Should I say if it's equal to 1, or if it's equal to 2, or if it's equal to 3, or if it's equal to 4? Then give me the exclamations.
Greater than 0.
Yes, wait a minute. Very close. But yes, in fact, you're right. I was going to say greater than or equal to 1, and you said greater than 0, which is entirely equivalent in the case of integers. Greater than 0 means 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. Greater than or equal to 1 means the same thing. So you're absolutely right, Miss. Who was talking? Suddenly everybody raises their hand. Maggie, was that you?
It was me, Sam.
It was me, who?
Sam.
Sam, okay. Samantha,
Just Sam.
okay. Let me give you a couple of minutes to review this. Let's look at the aggregate worksheet function. It's not testable. Let's see how far I get. Aggregate. Numerical functions, ranges with errors. Almost all Excel worksheet functions doing numerical calculations return an error if there's any error in the range being referenced. For example, we have these sales reps. I changed the coloring slightly since you saw it, since I sent you the book. Alan is misspelled. His commission is supposed to be 12% of the sale, but the VLOOKUP fails. So I want to add up all the numbers in yellow, but there is one error. In G5, the sum fails. In G9, the max fails. In G13, the max fails. But the aggregate function lets you ignore errors that occur when doing numerical calculation. See sheet 3. You can get around it. If you had 300,000 entries, then maybe there's usually, or there's often at least one error because of a typo somewhere. And you'd like to be able to add up all the ones except for the ones with errors. You can do that with the aggregate worksheet function is the only takeaway. The second sheet, we again want to add up all the entries in column D. In G5, so I'm in the second sheet, 2. numerical functions, hidden rows. G5, I have the sum of the column D. G9, I have the max. G13, I have the min. Let me hide some of the rows as I request in yellow. Before I hide them, notice the image has the same numbers, 30,000, 4623, 126. Let's hide some of the rows, any rows really, and you get the same answer, 30,000, 4623, 126. Excel worksheet functions performing numerical calculations include cells in all hidden rows and columns. For example, I just hid some and you get the same answer. However, the aggregate worksheet function lets you ignore hidden rows when doing numerical calculations. So the aggregate is kind of handy. You can use it to ignore hidden rows and to ignore errors. Three, aggregate worksheet function. I have these sales reps, Al, Ally, Flo, Rob, etc., sales and commissions. I have the sum, the aggregate is not testable. Let's take a look at the aggregate because I do want to introduce you to it. Equals aggregate. On a Windows machine, as soon as you type the open parentheses, you get prompted for one of the 15, actually now it's up to 19 possible entries. 1 means the average, 2 means the count, 3 means the count A. I'm surprised they put them in alphabetical order. Okay, that's okay. The common ones used are the sum and the average and the max and the min. You can tell it to ignore errors. All right, let me say, suppose I want to average them up. Aggregate. On a Mac, I would have to come over here and go to help on that function in order to see a list of the numbers. 1 means average. 9 means sum. Let me close that. Aggregate, cancel, cancel. 9. I typed a 9. God damn it. Aggregate 9, comma. And now it asks me what I want to ignore. Do I want to ignore hidden rows? Did I change my mind? I don't want to ignore anything. Do I want to ignore error values? Do I want to ignore hidden rows and error values? I think that's enough. I've stated that if you have errors in a numerical range, the classic worksheet functions fail. Let me hit escape and let me review that. If you have a range of numbers you want to add up, and if there's even one error anywhere in there, you cannot use the sum. You cannot use the max. Look at the formula bar, please. You cannot use the min. However, the aggregate lets you ignore errors. I can certainly see a case where you've got a million numbers you want to add up, but there's also one error and you don't know where the error is. So you'd like to ignore whatever errors there may be, if there are any. You can do it with the aggregate. Make a mental note of that. You can ignore hidden rows with the aggregate. You type equals aggregate, open, and on a Windows, you get a list of this possible completions. If you want the maximum, you type, well, you could double click it. The maximum is 3, I think. Nope, I misclicked. It is error prone, interesting. With the picture, it's helpful. 4 is the max. Looking at the image, 5 is the min. 6 is the product. That's pretty unusual. I've never actually seen an example where you wanted to multiply all the numbers in a range. Comma, what do you ignore? Ignore error values, comma, and then you give it the range. So it can be done with the aggregate worksheet function. I think I will leave it there. I'm not going to grade the homework set 4. Let me go back to the formal announcement. What I wrote is, if you make a reasonable effort. Yes, I think that's fair. The homework is to read up on the aggregate and try to learn a little bit about it. If you make a mistake, you'll get full credit because I didn't have time to cover it in the detail that is fair if I'm going to give you a question on it. But your assignment does include 4 aggregate. It asks you to ignore errors and hidden rows. Give it a shot. Any reasonable attempt will get you full credit. That's all I have. Any questions before we go?
Thank you, Professor.
You're all welcome.